Marcus Chen had always been different from the other humans aboard the research station Meridian. While his colleagues gathered in groups during mealtimes, laughing and sharing stories from their home worlds, Marcus preferred the quiet corner of the observation deck. He would sit there for hours, watching the stars and making notes in his personal journal about alien behavioral patterns he observed during their diplomatic missions. The Galactic Council had established the research station as a neutral meeting ground, where different species could study each other without the political pressures of their home governments. Humans were the newest members, having joined the galactic community only 50 years ago. Most species still viewed them as curious but ultimately insignificant creatures who had stumbled into space travel through luck rather than true intelligence. Dr. Sarah Williams, the station's human director, often tried to include Marcus in group activities. "You should socialize more," she would say during their weekly meetings. "The other species need to see that humans are collaborative and friendly. Your isolation makes them think we're anti-social." Marcus would nod politely but continue his solitary research. He had discovered something that the others missed in their eagerness to make friends with the galaxy's established powers. The alien species weren't just studying human culture and technology. They were cataloging human weaknesses, mapping their psychological profiles, and documenting their military capabilities with the thoroughness of predators studying prey. The Zephyrians were a tall, elegant species with crystalline skin that changed colors based on their emotions. They served as the Council's primary diplomats and prided themselves on their ability to read the intentions of other species. Ambassador Crixtal had taken a particular interest in the human researchers, often engaging them in what seemed like friendly conversations about Earth's history and human social structures. "Tell me about your wars," Crixtal would ask during formal dinners. "We find it fascinating that humans fight among themselves so frequently. Do you believe this aggressive nature serves you well in the galaxy?" Most humans would laugh and explain that they had moved beyond their violent past, that joining the galactic community had united their species in peace and exploration. But Marcus noticed how Crixtal's skin shifted to a deep purple whenever humans denied their capacity for violence. Among Zephyrians, purple indicated satisfaction with deception detected. The Nexari were even more subtle in their observations. These insectoid beings possessed compound eyes that could see across multiple spectrums of light. They rarely spoke directly but communicated through complex pheromone releases that their translation devices converted into words. Dr. Heinrich Müller, the station's chief anthropologist, had become particularly close to the Nexari research team. "They're showing us incredible technology," Heinrich told Marcus one evening in the laboratory. "Their bioengineering capabilities could revolutionize medicine on Earth. They've offered to share some basic techniques as a gesture of friendship." Marcus examined the data the Nexari had provided. The biological samples and genetic information were impressive, but they all related to human physiology. The aliens were learning how human bodies worked, how they could be modified or enhanced, and most importantly, how they could be destroyed efficiently. "Have they shared any information about their own biology?" Marcus asked. Heinrich paused his work and looked up with surprise. "Why would they? We're studying human enhancement, not Nexari physiology. Besides, they've been very generous with their knowledge. Generous predators share information about their prey," Marcus wrote in his journal that night. "They never reveal anything about themselves." The Corvin Empire maintained the largest delegation on the station. These reptilian warriors stood nearly 8 feet tall and possessed natural armor plating along their spines and arms. They claimed to be reformed conquerors who now focused on peaceful exploration and cultural exchange. Commander Thask led their delegation with what appeared to be genuine interest in human culture. "Your species intrigues us," Thask told the assembled human researchers during a cultural presentation. "You have no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced strength or speed, yet you survived on a hostile world and developed space travel. How did such a physically weak species achieve so much?" The humans beamed with pride and launched into detailed explanations of human ingenuity, tool use, and collaborative problem-solving. They demonstrated human technology, showed videos of Earth's cities and infrastructure, and eagerly answered every question about their manufacturing capabilities and resource distribution. Marcus watched from the back of the room as Thask's yellow eyes recorded everything. The Korvan's questions weren't born from admiration. They were tactical assessments. How many humans lived on each world? What were their primary defensive systems? How dependent were they on interstellar trade routes? After 6 months on the station, Marcus had filled 3 journals with observations that painted a troubling picture. The galaxy's major powers weren't welcoming humans into their community. They were studying them like scientists examining a new species of bacteria before deciding how to best neutralize any potential threat. The breakthrough came during what should have been a routine diplomatic dinner. Ambassador Krixtal had organized a celebration of interspecies cooperation with representatives from 12 different worlds. The humans dressed in their finest formal wear and prepared presentations about Earth's cultural contributions to the galactic community. Marcus sat at his usual place at the far end of the table, picking at the synthesized food while listening to the conversations around him. The translation devices allowed everyone to speak in their native languages, while others heard the words in their own tongue. But Marcus had noticed something weeks ago that no one else seemed to catch. The devices occasionally lagged or mistranslated certain phrases. When this happened, some of the aliens would glance at each other with what looked like amusement before the proper translation came through. Marcus had begun studying the original alien languages during his free time, using the station's linguistic database to decode conversations that weren't meant for human ears. Tonight, the lag was more frequent than usual. As Dr. Williams gave a passionate speech about humanity's hopes for peaceful cooperation among the stars. Marcus caught fragments of Zephyrian conversation from the other end of the table. The soft skins truly believe they belong here. One of the younger diplomats whispered in their crystalline language. "Quiet," Krixtal responded sharply. "The data collection phase is nearly complete. We cannot afford to reveal our true intentions before the harvest." The word harvest sent ice through Marcus's veins. He kept his expression neutral and continued eating while straining to hear more. Commander Thask was speaking with his military advisors in low Korvan growls that the translators rendered as technical discussions about mineral rights. But Marcus had spent enough time studying their language to understand the real meaning. 17 billion on the primary world, one advisor said, another 8 billion spread across the colonies. Their military vessels are impressive for their development level, but they lack proper shielding against plasma weaponry. "Excellent," Thask replied. "The Emperor will be pleased with our assessment." "How long until the subjugation fleet arrives?" 3 standard months. "We should begin the relocation protocols soon." Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the controlled temperature of the dining hall. Relocation protocols. Subjugation fleet. These weren't allies studying humanity for friendship. They were predators preparing for conquest. The Nixari delegation maintained their usual silence during the dinner, communicating only through their pheromone releases. But Marcus had also studied their chemical language, spending weeks in the laboratory analyzing the compounds their bodies produced. Their current pheromone signature was one he had seen before when they discussed successful experiments on test subjects. As the dinner continued with human speeches about interstellar brotherhood and alien responses praising human ingenuity, Marcus realized he was witnessing an elaborate deception. The entire research station was a trap designed to gather intelligence on humanity's capabilities and weaknesses before a coordinated attack. The most chilling discovery came near the end of the evening when Ambassador Krixtal stood to make a toast. "To our human friends," the Zephyrian said with skin glowing a warm gold color that indicated sincerity to human observers. "Your species brings such unique perspectives to our galaxy. We look forward to helping you find your proper place among the stars." But as Krixtal spoke, Marcus caught the ambassador's true words in the native language. "To the humans, whose naivety has provided us with everything we need to catalog their species for optimal processing. Soon they will understand their proper place as subjects of superior civilizations." The other alien delegates raised their glasses in agreement, their own translations full of flowery language about friendship and cooperation, while their native tongues spoke of conquest and domination. Marcus excused himself early from the dinner, claiming a sudden headache. He returned to his quarters and immediately began encrypting his research files. If his suspicions were correct, humanity had perhaps 3 months before fleets from multiple alien civilizations converged on Earth and the human colonies. He tried to contact Dr. Williams first, but she was still at the dinner, celebrating what she believed was a breakthrough in human-alien relations. Marcus left an urgent message requesting a private meeting but knew it might be too late. The research station's communication systems were monitored by all the participating species. Any attempt to warn Earth directly would be intercepted and decoded within hours. Instead, Marcus began preparing for a different kind of message. He had spent months studying not just alien languages and cultures, but their technologies as well. While his colleagues focused on making friends, Marcus had been learning how their enemies thought, how they planned, and most importantly, how they could be defeated. The galaxy's established powers had made a crucial error in their assessment of humanity. They saw humans as weak because they lacked natural weapons and armor. They dismissed human technology as primitive compared to their own advanced systems, but they had fundamentally misunderstood what made humans dangerous. Humans weren't dangerous because of their strength or their weapons. They were dangerous because of their ability to adapt, to learn from their enemies, and to transform from prey into predators when survival was at stake. The aliens had spent months studying humanity while assuming humans were too naive to study them in return. Marcus worked through the night, compiling everything he had learned about alien military capabilities, political structures, and technological weaknesses. He embedded the data in what appeared to be routine research reports and personal communications, using encryption methods that would look like standard security protocols to casual observers. The real challenge was getting the information to the right people on Earth without alerting the aliens to his discovery. Marcus knew that as soon as the alien delegations realized their deception had been detected, they would either accelerate their timeline or eliminate any witnesses who could warn humanity about the coming attack. As dawn broke over the artificial horizon of the research station, Marcus had made his decision. He couldn't save himself, but he might be able to save his species. The galaxy's predators had assumed humans would remain passive prey until the moment of attack. They were about to learn that human ingenuity worked best when human survival was threatened. The solitary human they had overlooked while gathering their intelligence would become their first lesson in why underestimating humanity was a fatal mistake. But first, he needed to disappear before they realized what he had discovered. Marcus began planning his escape from Meridian Station, knowing that once he was gone, the real hunt would begin. The aliens had spent months studying humans as prey. Now it was time for them to learn what humans could become when they transformed into hunters. Marcus spent the next 3 days carefully executing his escape plan while maintaining his normal routine. He attended the daily research briefings, submitted his reports on schedule, and even joined Dr. Williams for their weekly progress meeting. To any observer, he appeared to be the same quiet, dedicated researcher who had spent months cataloging alien cultural practices. But beneath the surface, Marcus was systematically preparing for war. His first priority was establishing secure communication with Earth without alerting the station's monitoring systems. The aliens had access to all official communication channels, but Marcus had discovered something during his months of observation. The research station's waste recycling system used quantum entanglement protocols to transmit molecular data to disposal facilities throughout the galaxy. The system was considered too mundane for security monitoring, which made it perfect for hiding encrypted messages. Marcus encoded his intelligence reports as molecular structure data for synthetic organic waste. To the automated systems, it looked like routine disposal manifests. In reality, he was transmitting detailed analyses of alien military capabilities, political hierarchies, and technological vulnerabilities directly to Earth's intelligence networks. The data revealed a galaxy far more dangerous than humanity had imagined. The Galactic Council wasn't a peaceful federation of equals. It was a predatory hierarchy where newer species were systematically studied, catalogued, and then either enslaved or eliminated depending on their potential value or threat level. Humanity had been classified as a Class 3 adaptive threat. Their technology was primitive enough to be easily defeated, but their psychological profiles showed dangerous levels of creativity and resilience. The Council's solution was preemptive subjugation before humans could develop more advanced defensive capabilities. The Zephyrian Empire would provide the initial diplomatic cover, claiming that humans had violated some obscure galactic treaty. The Corvan military would handle the actual conquest, with their battle fleets arriving simultaneously at Earth and the 12 human colony worlds. The Nexari would manage the biological aspects of subjugation, using their genetic manipulation technology to create docile human subspecies suitable for various forms of labor. Most chilling of all, this wasn't the first time the Council had implemented such a plan. Marcus had found references to 17 previous species that had undergone integration protocols over the past 3 centuries. None of those species existed as independent civilizations anymore. While encoding his intelligence reports, Marcus also began preparing for his own transformation from observer to operative. His colleagues saw him as a shy academic who preferred books to battles, but they didn't know about his background before joining the research program. Marcus had served 8 years in Earth's Special Operations Command before pursuing his doctorate in xenological studies. His military service had included advanced training in infiltration, sabotage, and unconventional warfare. The academic credentials that qualified him for the research position were real. But they weren't the only skills he possessed. More importantly, his military experience had taught him how to think like a predator. While his colleagues focused on understanding alien cultures, Marcus had been analyzing alien weaknesses and developing strategies for exploiting them. The Zephyrians were telepathically sensitive, which made them excellent diplomats, but also vulnerable to psychological warfare. Their crystalline skin that revealed emotions could be turned against them with the right chemical compounds. Marcus had already synthesized several substances that would cause permanent color changes, effectively blinding them to their own emotional states and those of others. The Corvan military relied heavily on their physical superiority and energy-based weapons. But their armor had a critical flaw that their engineers had never addressed because no species in their previous conquests had been clever enough to exploit it. The bioelectric field that powered their protective systems could be overloaded with specific electromagnetic frequencies, leaving them as vulnerable as any other organic being. The Nexari presented the greatest challenge because their hive mind communication made them extremely difficult to deceive or surprise. However, Marcus had discovered that their pheromone-based language could be weaponized. By releasing the right chemical compounds, he could essentially shout false information into their communication network, causing confusion and potentially even permanent damage to their neural connections. On his 4th day of preparation, Marcus implemented the first phase of his plan. During the morning research briefing, he released a subtle pheromone cocktail into the ventilation system of the conference room. The compound was undetectable to human senses, but would register to the Nexari as a message indicating that their human research subjects had developed resistance to their genetic manipulation protocols. The effect was immediate. The Nexari delegation became visibly agitated, their compound eyes dilating, and their antennae twitching rapidly. They began releasing emergency pheromones that roughly translated to containment breach and protocol failure. Within minutes, they had excused themselves from the briefing and retreated to their quarters for urgent consultations with their hive mind collective. Ambassador Crixtal noticed the Nexari's distress, but couldn't interpret their chemical communications. The Zephyrian approached Dr. Williams after the briefing with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Is there some problem with our insectoid colleagues?" Crixtal asked, skin shifting to a worried blue coloration. "They seemed quite disturbed during the meeting." "I'm sure it's nothing serious," Dr. Williams replied. "Perhaps they received some concerning news from their home world. We all know how dedicated they are to their research." Marcus watched the exchange from across the room, noting how Crixtal's skin briefly flashed purple when the ambassador heard the word research. The Zephyrian suspected something but couldn't identify the source of the problem. That afternoon, Marcus put the second phase of his plan into motion. He had been observing the station's security protocols for weeks and identified a critical vulnerability in their monitoring systems. The aliens used sophisticated sensors to track movement and communications, but they had never encountered human stealth technology. Marcus had modified his personal clothing with metamaterial fibers that could bend light around his body, making him effectively invisible to the station's optical sensors. The technology was experimental and only worked for short periods, but it was enough for what he needed to accomplish. Using his temporary invisibility, Marcus infiltrated the Corvan delegation's secured area during their afternoon military briefings. He placed micro-devices throughout their conference room that would begin broadcasting specific electromagnetic frequencies when activated remotely. The devices were disguised as decorative elements that matched the room's existing aesthetic, making them virtually undetectable unless someone knew exactly what to look for. The infiltration also allowed Marcus to access the Corvan communication system and download detailed intelligence about their invasion fleet. What he discovered exceeded his worst fears. The Corvan battle group consisted of 47 heavy cruisers, each armed with plasma weaponry capable of sterilizing planetary surfaces. The fleet was already en route to human space and would arrive in 63 days. More concerning was the revelation that this was only the initial invasion force. The Galactic Council had committed resources for a sustained campaign that would systematically eliminate human resistance across all populated worlds. They had planned for every contingency except one: the possibility that humans would discover their intentions in advance and prepare accordingly. That evening, Marcus transmitted his most crucial intelligence package to Earth through the waste recycling system. The data included detailed schematics of alien military vessels, deployment timelines, and technological specifications that would allow Earth's defense forces to develop effective countermeasures. But he also included something more valuable than tactical intelligence. Marcus had identified the fundamental psychological weakness that united all of the galaxy's predatory species: arrogance. They had dominated younger civilizations for so long that they had become incapable of conceiving defeat. Their military strategies assumed that their enemies would react predictably, following patterns established by previous conquests. Humanity's salvation lay in doing what no other species had done before: refusing to fight the war that the aliens expected. Instead of defending fixed positions and protecting population centers, humans needed to become ghosts in the galaxy, striking from unexpected directions and disappearing before retaliation could be organized. The key was to turn the galaxy's size against its predators. The Council controlled vast territories, but their control depended on maintaining complex supply lines and communication networks. A small force of human raiders could cause damage far beyond their numbers by targeting the infrastructure that held the galactic civilization together. But first, Marcus needed to complete his mission on the research station. His infiltration had been detected, not by the aliens, but by the station's AI systems that were programmed to notice unusual behavior patterns. Dr. Williams had been informed that one of her researchers was exhibiting signs of psychological stress and was recommended for immediate evaluation. Marcus received the notice that evening and knew his time was running out. The psychological evaluation would include detailed scans that would reveal his military background and trigger a full security investigation. Once the aliens realized that a trained human operative had been observing their activities for months, they would either accelerate their invasion timeline or eliminate all evidence of their plans. He had perhaps 18 hours before the evaluation was scheduled to begin. Marcus used that time to implement the final phase of his operation on the research station. If he was going to be exposed, he would ensure that his exposure served a purpose beyond intelligence gathering. Marcus spent the night moving through the station's service corridors, placing shaped charges at critical structural points. The explosives were small and precisely positioned to create maximum damage to the station's life support and propulsion systems without actually killing the inhabitants. His goal wasn't mass murder but rather the creation of a crisis that would force the alien delegations to reveal their true priorities. He also programmed delayed activation sequences for all of the devices he had planted in the Corvan conference room. When triggered, the electromagnetic pulse generators would overload their armor systems and disable their personal weapons, leaving them temporarily vulnerable. The timing would coincide with the structural explosions to create maximum confusion and panic. At dawn on his final day aboard the research station, Marcus submitted his resignation to Dr. Williams through official channels. The message was brief and professional, citing personal reasons for his immediate departure. By the time she read it, he would already be gone. Marcus made his way to the station's small craft bay, where a single human shuttle sat prepared for routine supply runs to nearby systems. He had spent weeks gradually modifying the shuttle's systems, upgrading its engines and navigation computers with components borrowed from various alien technologies. The shuttle now possessed stealth capabilities and faster-than-light travel capacity that far exceeded its original specifications. As Marcus initiated the shuttle's launch sequence, he activated the devices he had placed throughout the station. The explosions began in the lower levels, disrupting power distribution and sending tremors through the entire structure. Emergency alarms echoed through the corridors as artificial gravity fluctuated, and atmospheric processors struggled to maintain breathable air. The electromagnetic pulse generators activated moments later, targeting the Corvan delegation's quarters and conference areas. The reptilian warriors found themselves trapped as their armor systems failed, and their weapons became inert. Their roars of confusion and anger could be heard even through the station's sound-dampening systems. In the chaos that followed, the alien delegations revealed their true nature. Instead of cooperating to save the station and its inhabitants, each species immediately prioritized their own survival and the protection of their classified research data. The Zephyrians began destroying their diplomatic files, while the Nixari released emergency pheromones that called for immediate military support. Most telling of all was the Corvan response. Instead of helping with evacuation procedures, they attempted to contact their invasion fleet and accelerate the attack timeline. The electromagnetic interference from Marcus's devices prevented the transmission, but their intent was clear to anyone monitoring their communications. Dr. Williams and the other human researchers found themselves abandoned as the aliens focused on saving themselves and their intelligence assets. The mask of friendship and cooperation dissolved completely, leaving the humans to witness the predatory nature that had been hidden beneath diplomatic courtesies. Marcus watched the chaos unfold through the shuttle's sensors as he departed the station. The structural damage would force an evacuation, but the station could be repaired within weeks. More importantly, the incident would be investigated by Council security forces who would discover evidence of the intelligence-gathering operation and the planned invasion of human space. The investigation would buy humanity additional time as the various alien factions blamed each other for the security breach and argued over whether to proceed with their original timeline. But Marcus knew the reprieve would be temporary. Eventually, they would realize that a single human operative had outmaneuvered their entire intelligence network and escaped with detailed knowledge of their plans. When that moment came, the galaxy's predators would learn their first lesson about human adaptability. The quiet researcher they had dismissed as harmless had transformed into something they had never encountered before. A human who understood their weaknesses and was prepared to exploit them. Marcus set course for the Outer Rim territories, where human survey teams had established small research outposts beyond the reach of Council monitoring. From there, he would begin the next phase of his mission. The solitary human who had gathered intelligence on the galaxy's predators would now become the hunter who taught them why underestimating humanity was a fatal mistake. Behind him, the research station continued broadcasting distress signals as its alien occupants struggled to maintain life support systems. But Marcus was already thinking ahead to the larger war that was coming. Humanity had 60 days to prepare for an invasion that had been planned for months. It would require a miracle of coordination and ingenuity to mount an effective defense. Fortunately, as the galaxy was about to learn, humans specialized in impossible victories when their survival was at stake. Marcus reached the Outer Rim Research Station Prometheus 3 after 18 hours of faster-than-light travel. The facility was little more than a collection of prefabricated modules connected to asteroid mining platforms, home to 47 human researchers and support staff. To the Galactic Council, it was an insignificant outpost barely worth monitoring. To Marcus, it was the perfect base for launching a war that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of human capabilities. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station commander, met Marcus at the docking bay with obvious concern. Word of the incident at Meridian Station had already reached the outer colonies through official channels, though the details remained classified. "Marcus, what happened out there?" Elena asked as they walked through the main corridor. "The reports say there was some kind of system malfunction, but Council investigators are treating it like a security breach." "It was both," Marcus replied, carrying a sealed data case that contained his months of intelligence gathering. "We need to talk privately. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but humanity's survival depends on you believing every word." Elena led him to her personal office, a small compartment overlooking the asteroid field where mining robots worked continuously to extract rare minerals. The view was stark and beautiful, reminding Marcus of humanity's ability to thrive in environments that other species found uninhabitable. Over the next hour, Marcus laid out everything he had discovered about the Galactic Council's true nature and their plans for humanity. He presented his evidence methodically, recordings of alien conversations in their native languages, technical specifications of their military hardware, and psychological profiles that revealed the predatory hierarchy controlling galactic civilization. Elena listened without interruption, her expression growing more grim as Marcus described the scope of the threat facing their species. When he finished, she sat in silence for several minutes, processing the implications of what she had heard. 60 days, she finally said. They'll have battle fleets at Earth and every human colony in 60 days. Even if Earth Defense Command believes your intelligence, that's not enough time to mount an effective defense against the forces you've described. That's why we're not going to fight a defensive war, Marcus explained. The Council expects humans to behave like every other species they've conquered. They anticipate desperate last stands at our major population centers, heroic sacrifices to buy time for civilian evacuations, and ultimately, surrender when the cost becomes too high. Elena leaned forward in her chair. What are you suggesting? Marcus activated his datapad and displayed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy showing major trade routes, communication relays, and supply depots. Red indicators marked targets throughout Council space, from core worlds to frontier outposts. We're going to teach them what happens when they threaten a species that evolved as persistence hunters, Marcus said. Humans didn't survive on Earth by being stronger or faster than predators. We survived by being smarter, more adaptable, and by never giving up. The galaxy is about to learn why that combination is more dangerous than any weapon they possess. Quote, the plan Marcus outlined was audacious in its scope and revolutionary in its approach. Instead of defending human space against invasion, small teams of human operatives would launch simultaneous raids against Council infrastructure throughout the galaxy. The attacks would target communication networks, supply convoys, and administrative centers, creating chaos and confusion on a scale that no galactic government had ever experienced. The psychological impact would be as important as the physical damage. The Council's member species had never faced an enemy that could strike anywhere at any time without warning. Their vast territorial holdings, once a source of strength, would become a liability as they tried to defend thousands of vulnerable targets with limited military resources. You're talking about turning every human in the galaxy into a guerrilla fighter, Elena observed. Our merchant crews, our research teams, our diplomatic personnel. The Council will consider that a violation of every civilized standard of warfare. The Council doesn't recognize civilized standards when it comes to species they plan to enslave, Marcus replied. They've been studying us like laboratory animals while planning our extinction. It's time they learned that some animals bite back. Elena studied the target list, noting the strategic importance of each location. This will require coordination across 12 star systems and hundreds of independent human operations. How do you plan to communicate without the Council intercepting our transmissions? Marcus opened his data case and withdrew a device that looked like a standard quantum communication relay, but had been extensively modified with components from multiple alien technologies. I've been reverse engineering Council communication protocols for months, he explained. This transmitter can piggyback signals on their own network traffic, making our messages invisible to their security systems. More importantly, it can inject false data into their information streams, corrupting their intelligence and causing their own forces to work against each other. The next 6 hours were spent establishing secure communications with human operations throughout the galaxy. Marcus's intelligence about the pending invasion had already reached Earth through the waste disposal system he had compromised. But coordinating a galaxy-wide resistance required more sophisticated methods. The response from Earth Defense Command was exactly what Marcus had expected. Admiral Sarah Chen, his cousin and the highest-ranking human military officer, appeared on the secure channel with barely contained fury. Marcus, what you're proposing is madness, she said after reviewing his operational plan. You want to abandon the defense of our home worlds to launch terrorist attacks across the galaxy. If we fail, every human settlement becomes a target for retaliation. Sarah, every human settlement is already a target, Marcus replied. The Council has spent months planning our complete subjugation. Our choice isn't between war and peace. It's between fighting a war we can win and fighting one that ends with our extinction. Admiral Chen's image flickered as quantum interference disrupted the long-range transmission. Even if your strategy works, the diplomatic consequences will be catastrophic. Humanity will be branded as a rogue species that threatens galactic stability. Good, Marcus said. Fear is more useful than friendship when dealing with predators. The galaxy needs to learn that threatening humanity carries consequences they're not prepared to handle. The debate continued for another hour before Admiral Chen reluctantly agreed to coordinate Earth's military resources with Marcus's guerrilla campaign. The official human response would maintain diplomatic channels while secretly preparing for the unconventional war that Marcus had designed. Over the following days, Prometheus 3 became the nerve center for an underground network that spanned human space and beyond. Research vessels became intelligence gatherers, merchant crews volunteered for sabotage missions, and diplomatic personnel began cataloging targets in the systems they visited. Dr. James Patterson, a xenobiologist who had been studying Council species for 3 years, provided crucial intelligence about alien psychology and vulnerabilities. The Zephyrians are incredibly sensitive to electromagnetic interference, he reported during a planning session. A properly timed disruption of their neural networks could cause permanent damage to their telepathic abilities. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, who commanded a small freight hauler that serviced Council trade routes, offered tactical insights from her years of experience navigating alien space. Security is lighter on the frontier worlds where they process raw materials, she noted. Most of their defensive systems are concentrated around the core planets, where their governments are located. Marcus synthesized these contributions into operational plans that played to humanity's strengths while exploiting the Council's weaknesses. The aliens had grown complacent after centuries of unchallenged dominance. Their security protocols assumed that threats would come from other established powers, not from the species they had marked for conquest. The first test of human capabilities came when a Council patrol intercepted Dr. Maria Santos, a human xenologist whose research vessel was carrying supplies for the Resistance Network. The Corvan crew that boarded her ship expected to find a helpless academic who would surrender without resistance. Instead, they encountered a human who had spent weeks studying their physiology and preparing countermeasures for exactly this scenario. Dr. Santos activated a sonic weapon tuned to frequencies that disrupted Corvan inner ear function, causing severe disorientation and nausea. While the aliens struggled to maintain their balance, she released aerosol compounds that corroded their armor's bioelectric systems. The boarding party found themselves helpless as their protective gear failed and their weapons became inert. Dr. Santos secured their equipment, downloaded their ship's navigation database, and transmitted the intelligence to Prometheus 3 before disappearing into the asteroid fields where Council sensors couldn't track her small vessel. The incident sent shockwaves through the Corvan military hierarchy. A single human civilian had defeated an entire boarding party of their elite warriors, using nothing but scientific knowledge and improvised weapons. The interrogation recordings revealed something even more disturbing. The human had spoken to them in fluent Corvan, demonstrating an understanding of their culture and military protocols that should have been impossible for an outsider to acquire. Similar encounters began occurring throughout Council space as human operatives implemented the techniques that Marcus had developed. Merchant crews disabled patrol vessels with electromagnetic pulse weapons. Research teams sabotaged communication relays using insider knowledge of alien technology. Diplomatic personnel gathered intelligence while maintaining the pretense of normal cultural exchanges. The cumulative effect was devastating to Council operations. Their communication networks experienced cascading failures as human infiltrators corrupted data streams and redirected message traffic. Supply convoys found themselves attacked by invisible enemies who struck without warning and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Administrative centers discovered that their computer systems had been compromised by humans who understood their security protocols better than their own technicians. Most psychologically damaging was the realization that humans had been preparing for this conflict while maintaining perfect facades of naive friendship. Every diplomatic dinner, every cultural exchange, and every scientific collaboration had been an intelligence-gathering operation. The species they had dismissed as harmless had been studying them with the focused intensity of predators selecting prey. Ambassador Krixtall, who had survived the incident at Meridian Station, found himself facing a crisis that threatened the very foundation of Zephyrian society. Their telepathic abilities, which had made them the galaxy's premier diplomats, were proving useless against humans who could lie with perfect conviction while gathering intelligence for a war their enemies didn't know was coming. "How is it possible?" Krixtall asked during an emergency session of the Council leadership. "Our psychological profiles indicated that humans were incapable of sustained deception. Their emotional responses suggested complete sincerity during every diplomatic interaction." Commander Thask, whose military forces were struggling to adapt to an enemy that refused to fight conventional battles, provided the answer that none of them wanted to hear. "We were studying humans as if they were any other species," the Corvan leader admitted. "We looked at their individual capabilities and concluded they were weak, but we never considered what they might become when their survival was threatened. They have not simply adapted to our threat, they have evolved into something we have never encountered before." The Council's response was predictable and precisely what Marcus had anticipated. Instead of abandoning their invasion plans, they accelerated the timeline and committed additional resources to ensure human resistance would be crushed quickly and completely. They viewed the guerrilla attacks as a temporary inconvenience that would end once human population centers were under direct military control. This decision played directly into Marcus's strategy. Every ship the Council diverted to hunting human raiders was one fewer vessel available for the main invasion force. Every communication relay they reinforced was a resource not allocated to offensive operations. The aliens were being forced to fight a defensive war across their entire territory while simultaneously preparing for an invasion of human space. But Marcus knew the psychological warfare was only the beginning. The real test would come when the Council's invasion fleets reached human space and discovered that their enemies had abandoned the defensive strategies that every other species had employed. The galaxy's predators were about to encounter prey that had transformed into hunters. The solitary human who had gathered their secrets was now coordinating a campaign that would teach them why underestimating human ingenuity was a mistake they would never have the opportunity to make again. From his command center on Prometheus 3, Marcus watched intelligence reports flowing in from across the galaxy. Human teams were executing missions with precision that surprised even their own military commanders. Scientists were proving as effective as soldiers when properly motivated and equipped. Merchants and diplomats were gathering intelligence and striking targets that military operatives couldn't approach. The transformation was remarkable and terrifying. Humanity was discovering capabilities they hadn't known they possessed, driven by the knowledge that their very existence hung in the balance. The species that had always excelled at adaptation was evolving into something the galaxy had never seen before. In 51 days, the Council's invasion fleets would arrive at Earth, expecting to find a civilization preparing for its last desperate stand. Instead, they would encounter a species that had chosen to bring the war to them. The Corvan invasion fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly 59 days after Marcus had escaped from Meridian Station. Commander Thask stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying tactical displays that showed what should have been humanity's last, desperate defensive preparations. Instead, the sensors revealed something that made no sense, according to every previous conquest the Corvan Empire had conducted. Earth's defense fleet was nowhere to be found. "Scan the entire system," Thask ordered his tactical officer. "The humans must be hiding behind their moon, or perhaps massing near their outer planets, for a surprise attack." The scans revealed abandoned orbital installations and automated defense platforms that had been systematically stripped of weapons and equipment. The massive shipyards around Luna showed signs of recent industrial activity, but the vessels that had been under construction were gone. Most puzzling of all, the planet's surface showed no evidence of military preparations or civilian evacuations. Earth looked like a civilization that had simply vanished rather than one preparing for invasion. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission on standard diplomatic frequencies," the communications officer reported. "It appears to be from the human government." The message that appeared on Thask's command screen featured Admiral Sarah Chen in her formal Earth Defense Command uniform. Her expression was calm and professional, showing none of the fear or desperation that typically characterized final diplomatic contacts before planetary conquest. Commander Thask, I assume you're wondering where our fleet has gone, Admiral Chen said. The answer is simple. We've decided not to fight the war you expected us to fight. Instead, we're going to teach your empire what happens when you threaten a species that evolved to survive by any means necessary. The transmission cut to real-time footage from across Corvan space. The images showed human operatives conducting simultaneous operations against targets throughout the Empire's territory. Supply depots erupted in precisely coordinated explosions. Communication arrays went dark as human infiltrators corrupted their control systems. Administrative centers found themselves locked down as their own security protocols were turned against them. While you've spent weeks traveling to Earth, Admiral Chen continued, our people have been systematically dismantling the infrastructure that holds your empire together. Every supply convoy you've lost, every communication relay we've destroyed, every administrative system we've corrupted, has been part of a campaign designed to teach you a simple lesson. Humans are not prey. Commander Thask felt his throat ridges flush with anger as he realized the scope of the deception. The humans hadn't abandoned Earth because they couldn't defend it. They had abandoned it because they were fighting the war in Corvan territory, turning the Empire's vast holdings into a battlefield where every human civilian was a potential enemy combatant. All ships, maintain formation, and proceed with planetary bombardment, Thask ordered. If the humans want to play games in our territory, they can watch their homeworld burn for their impudence. But as the Corvan fleet moved toward Earth's orbital space, they discovered that the humans had prepared one more surprise for them. What appeared to be an empty planet suddenly revealed itself to be an elaborate trap that had been months in the making. Earth's missing defense fleet materialized from hiding positions throughout the inner solar system. But these weren't the same vessels that Corvan intelligence had cataloged during their reconnaissance missions. Human engineers had spent the reprieve time upgrading their ships with technologies reverse-engineered from alien systems captured during the guerrilla campaign. The human vessels that engaged the Corvan fleet moved with impossible agility and struck with weapons that should not have existed in humanity's arsenal. Electromagnetic pulse cannons, based on Marcus's analysis of Corvan armor vulnerabilities, began systematically disabling the invasion fleet's defensive systems. More shocking was the revelation that human ships could seemingly appear and disappear at will. Earth's engineers had perfected stealth technology that rendered their vessels invisible to Corvan sensors until the moment they opened fire. The predators found themselves being hunted by prey that had learned to use the darkness between stars as camouflage. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Instead of the desperate last stand that the Corvans had expected, they faced an enemy that fought with cold precision and technological superiority that seemed to come from nowhere. Human crews that had been studying their equipment for mere months were outmaneuvering Corvan warriors who had trained for decades. Captain Rodriguez, now commanding a modified stealth frigate, demonstrated the transformation that had occurred throughout human space. Her vessel ghosted through the Corvan formation, targeting command ships with weapons that exploited every vulnerability Marcus had identified. Her crew, composed entirely of former merchant spacers, coordinated their attacks with the skill of elite military units. Corvan vessel, thundering victory. This is Captain Rodriguez of the human ship Defiance. She broadcast as her electromagnetic pulse cannons disabled the enemy cruiser's armor systems. You came here expecting to find helpless victims. Instead, you found hunters who've spent months learning how to kill your kind. I suggest you withdraw before we demonstrate more of humanity's educational achievements. The psychological impact of the engagement was devastating to Corvan morale. Their warriors had never faced an enemy that seemed to know their capabilities better than they knew themselves. Every tactical maneuver the Corvans attempted was countered by humans who anticipated their strategies and exploited their weaknesses with surgical precision. Worse still, were the reports flooding in from across the Empire, as the scope of human operations became clear. The raids that had seemed like isolated incidents were revealed to be part of a coordinated campaign that had crippled Corvan infrastructure on hundreds of worlds. Supply lines that had operated for centuries were severed. Communication networks that connected their military commands experienced cascading failures. Administrative systems that managed their conquered territories found themselves locked out by humans who had learned to speak to their computers in languages the machines understood better than their operators. The realization struck Commander Thask like a physical blow. The humans had not simply been preparing for war during the months of diplomatic contact. They had been conducting a war that the Corvans hadn't recognized until it was too late to stop. Marcus Chen, monitoring the battle from Prometheus 3, watched his strategies play out exactly as he had predicted. The Corvan fleet was discovering what every Earth predator had learned over millions of years of evolution. Humans were persistence hunters who never gave up, never stopped learning every line, and never fought fair when survival was at stake. Phase 2 is complete, Marcus reported to Admiral Chen over their secure channel. Corvan forces are withdrawing from Earth orbit. Their fleet commanders are requesting emergency reinforcements from home territory, but the infrastructure damage has made coordinated response impossible. Casualties? Admiral Chen asked. Minimal on our side. Corvan losses are approximately 40% of their invasion force, with most of the remainder experiencing critical system failures from electromagnetic pulse weapons. More importantly, their command structure is beginning to fragment as individual ship captains lose confidence in their leadership. The battle for Earth had lasted 6 hours. The Corvan Empire's carefully planned invasion had been reduced to a chaotic retreat as their fleet commanders struggled to understand how a technologically inferior species had achieved tactical dominance in their first major Citan engagement. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The Corvan defeat at Earth would send shockwaves throughout the Galactic Council, forcing every member species to reconsider their assumptions about human capabilities. The challenge now would be maintaining the momentum while the galaxy's predators adapted to the new reality. The Zephyrian Empire was already implementing emergency protocols as reports of human capabilities reached their leadership. Ambassador Krixtal found himself facing questions that threatened the very foundation of Zephyrian society. How could a species they had studied so thoroughly surprise them so completely? What other capabilities might humans possess that their psychological profiles had failed to detect? The answer came in the form of coordinated strikes against Zephyrian diplomatic installations throughout the galaxy. Human operatives, many of them researchers and diplomats who had spent months in close contact with Zephyrian personnel, demonstrated knowledge of their host's society that went far beyond anything that should have been possible through casual observation. Dr. Patterson, the xenobiologist who had contributed to Marcus's vulnerability assessments, led a team that infiltrated the primary Zephyrian communication relay in the Centauri cluster. Using techniques derived from months of studying their target species, the humans introduced a crystalline virus into the relay's organic components that caused permanent damage to the network's telepathic interfaces. The attack was particularly devastating because it exploited the Zephyrians' greatest strength against them: their telepathic abilities, which made them supreme diplomats and negotiators, required precise neural harmonics to function properly. The virus that Dr. Patterson's team introduced created subtle disruptions in these harmonics that would progressively worsen over time. Within days, Zephyrian diplomats throughout the galaxy began experiencing telepathic interference that made them unable to sense the emotional states of other species. Their advantage in negotiations evaporated as they found themselves blind to the very psychological cues that had made them the Council's primary representatives. The Nexari response was even more dramatic. Their hive mind collective, which had never experienced coordinated deception on a large scale, found itself facing an enemy that seemed to speak their chemical language with native fluency. Human operatives released carefully crafted pheromone combinations that injected false information directly into their communication networks. The result was chaos throughout Nexari space, as conflicting information caused their collective intelligence to fragment. Individual hive nodes began operating on contradictory data sets, leading to resource allocation disputes and territorial conflicts that had never occurred in their species' history. Dr. Santos, who had proven herself against a Corvan boarding party, demonstrated the effectiveness of human biological warfare against the Nexari collective. Using compounds derived from Earth's agricultural biotechnology, she created pheromone analogs that convinced entire Nexari colonies that they were receiving contradictory orders from their central authority. The psychological impact was profound. The Nexari had never experienced doubt about their collective decisions because their hive mind structure eliminated individual uncertainty. Suddenly, they found themselves questioning information that should have been absolutely reliable. creating a crisis of confidence that paralyzed their decision-making processes. As reports of human capabilities spread throughout Council space, member species began to reassess their relationship with the organization that had promised them easy conquest of human territory. The guarantee of quick victory had become a nightmare of asymmetric warfare that threatened to destabilize the entire galactic order. The Altarian hegemony, whose crystalline technology formed the backbone of Council communication systems, found their networks compromised by humans who demonstrated an intuitive understanding of their quantum entanglement protocols. The Threnodi Federation discovered that their military encryption had been decoded by human mathematicians who approached their algorithms from perspectives that their original designers had never considered. Most disturbing of all was the realization that humans had been gathering this intelligence while maintaining perfect facades of cooperation and friendship. Every species that had hosted human delegations now faced the paranoid question: what else might the humans have learned during their visits? Marcus watched the cascade of panic spread through Council space from his command center, noting how each species' response revealed additional vulnerabilities that could be exploited in future operations. The galaxy's predators were discovering that their prey possessed something they had never encountered before: the ability to become more dangerous than their enemies while maintaining the appearance of harmless cooperation. The transformation was remarkable. Human merchants had become intelligence operatives who mapped enemy territories while conducting routine trade negotiations. Researchers had evolved into saboteurs who understood alien technologies better than their creators. Diplomats had revealed themselves as psychological warfare specialists who could manipulate entire species while appearing to seek friendship. But perhaps most significantly, the galaxy was witnessing the emergence of a human military doctrine that abandoned every conventional assumption about interstellar warfare. Instead of defending fixed positions, human forces had become nomadic hunters who struck without warning and disappeared before retaliation could be organized. The species that had survived Earth's hostile environment by outlasting predators was now teaching the galaxy why persistence hunting was the most terrifying form of warfare ever developed. The Council's member species were beginning to understand that they had not simply threatened humanity with conquest, they had triggered an evolutionary adaptation that was transforming their former prey into the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever seen. Commander Thask, retreating toward Korvan space with the remnants of his invasion fleet, transmitted a message that would become legendary among future military historians. We came to harvest sheep and discovered wolves. The humans have not simply prepared for war. They have become war itself. The galaxy's established order was crumbling as species that had dominated younger civilizations for centuries found themselves outmatched by enemies they had dismissed as primitive and harmless. The hunt had begun, and humanity was proving to be a predator unlike any the stars had ever seen. 6 months after the failed Corvan invasion of Earth, Marcus Chen stood in the council chambers of New Geneva, the galactic capital that had served as the seat of alien power for over 3 centuries. The massive building, constructed from crystalline materials that demonstrated the technological superiority of the founding species, now hosted an emergency session that would determine the future of interstellar civilization. The transformation of the galaxy had been swift and absolute. What began as humanity's desperate struggle for survival had evolved into a complete restructuring of galactic power dynamics. The species that had ruled the stars through fear and technological dominance found themselves facing an enemy that had learned to use their own strengths against them with devastating effectiveness. Representative Crixtal, whose telepathic abilities had been permanently damaged during the human campaign, spoke for the remaining Zephyrian leadership with visible strain. The crystal formations on his skin, once capable of displaying subtle emotional nuances, now flickered randomly as his neural networks struggled to process basic thoughts. The Zephyrian Empire formally requests a cessation of human military activities, Crixtal announced, his words translated by mechanical devices since the organic systems that had once provided instantaneous communication between species had been systematically disrupted. Our diplomatic corps has been reduced to 30% operational capacity. Our communication networks experience daily failures that prevent coordination between our core worlds and frontier territories. The admission was remarkable considering that Zephyrian diplomacy had once been considered the finest in the galaxy. Their telepathic abilities had made them natural negotiators who could sense the true intentions of other species and craft agreements that benefited all parties. Now they struggled to maintain basic governmental functions as their enhanced senses worked against them, creating static and confusion instead of clarity. Admiral Chen, representing Earth's interests as the de facto leader of human military operations, reviewed the datapad containing surrender proposals from 7 different galactic powers. The document represented the complete capitulation of civilizations that had controlled star systems when humanity was still developing agriculture. The Corvan Empire offers to recognize human territorial sovereignty and provide reparations for their unprovoked invasion, Admiral Chen read aloud. They propose a non-aggression pact and the establishment of trade relationships based on mutual respect rather than subjugation protocols. Commander Thask, attending the session under armed guard and wearing ceremonial chains that indicated his status as a defeated enemy, maintained the rigid posture that Corvan military tradition demanded even in surrender. His armor, once a symbol of personal invincibility, had been modified to prevent the bioelectric systems that had made his species so formidable in combat. The Corvan people acknowledged that our assessment of human capabilities was fundamentally flawed, Thask stated with the formal precision that his culture valued above personal comfort. We underestimated not simply your technological abilities, but your capacity for adaptation under pressure. Our military academies will study human tactical innovations for generations to learn from our failures. The praise was particularly significant coming from a species whose entire social structure was built around martial excellence. The Corvans had never before acknowledged military inferiority to any enemy, preferring death in battle to the admission that their opponents had demonstrated superior fighting capabilities. Marcus listened to the surrender negotiations with the detached interest of someone observing the end of an historical epoch. The galaxy's predatory hierarchy, which had seemed unbreakable just months ago, had collapsed under pressure from a species that had learned to think beyond conventional limitations. The Nexari Collective sent representatives who communicated through mechanical translators rather than their traditional pheromone releases. The chemical warfare that human operatives had conducted against their communication systems had created permanent damage to their ability to function as a unified hive mind. Individual Nexari now experienced something their species had never known: personal uncertainty about collective decisions. The collective acknowledges that our biological communication systems are incompatible with human defensive capabilities. Their representative announced through electronic speakers that converted digital signals into audible words. We propose the establishment of buffer zones where our species can coexist without the chemical interference that has proven so disruptive to our social structures. Dr. Santos, who had pioneered many of the biological warfare techniques used against the Nexari, observed the proceedings from the human delegation with scientific fascination. The results of her work extended far beyond military applications. The Nexari were evolving toward individual consciousness as their damaged hive-mind connections forced them to develop personal decision-making capabilities. The transformation was unprecedented in their species' history. Nexari, who had never experienced individual thoughts, were learning to form personal opinions and make autonomous choices. The biological warfare had triggered an evolutionary adaptation that was fundamentally changing what it meant to be Nexari. Species after species presented their terms of surrender, each offering concessions that reflected their understanding of how completely humanity had outmaneuvered them. The Altarian hegemony proposed technological exchange programs that would give humans access to their most advanced systems in exchange for guarantees that human infiltration specialists would stop corrupting their quantum communication networks. The Threnody Federation offered territorial concessions that would establish human colonies in star systems they had controlled for millennia. Their mathematical encryption systems, once considered unbreakable, had proven vulnerable to human approaches that treated their algorithms as puzzles to be solved rather than absolute barriers to unauthorized access. Each surrender agreement included clauses that acknowledged humanity's right to maintain the defensive capabilities that had proven so effective during the conflict. The galaxy's former predators understood that any attempt to restrict human military development would be viewed as preparation for future aggression. But the most significant agreement came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Tekrex, of the Void Swimmers, a species that had remained neutral throughout the conflict, requested permission to address the assembly with a proposal that would reshape galactic civilization. The void swimmers were ancient beyond most species' comprehension, having achieved interstellar travel millions of years before the current galactic order emerged. They had observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, while maintaining strict neutrality in conflicts between younger species. "We have watched the galaxy's response to humanity's emergence with great interest," Ambassador Tekrex announced through translation systems that converted their subsonic communication into audible language. "What we have witnessed is not simply one species defeating another in warfare. We have observed the emergence of a new form of galactic civilization based on principles that have not been seen in this region of space for over 2 million years." The ambassador's words carried weight that exceeded their diplomatic rank. The void swimmers possessed knowledge and technology that made the Council's most advanced systems appear primitive, yet they had chosen to remain observers rather than rulers. Their analysis of humanity's impact carried implications that extended far beyond the current conflict. Previous galactic orders have been based on hierarchical dominance, with stronger species controlling weaker ones through superior technology or military force, Ambassador Tekrex continued. Humanity has demonstrated something different: the ability to achieve dominance through adaptation and intelligence rather than inherent superiority. This represents a fundamental evolution in how civilizations can interact with each other. Marcus felt a chill of recognition as he understood the full scope of what the void swimmer was describing. Humanity hadn't simply won a war against superior enemies. They had proven that intelligence and adaptability could overcome any technological advantage, which meant that no species could ever again assume permanent dominance based on their current capabilities. The implications rippled through the assembly as each species' representatives realized what this meant for their future security. If humans could learn to defeat enemies who possessed overwhelming advantages, then every species was potentially vulnerable to any other species that demonstrated sufficient creativity and determination. The void swimmers proposed the establishment of a new galactic order based on principles of adaptive equilibrium, Ambassador Tekrex announced. No species will be permitted to achieve the level of dominance that the Council once represented. Instead, all civilizations will be required to demonstrate that they can defend themselves against any potential threat while maintaining peaceful relationships with their neighbors. The proposal was revolutionary in its implications. Instead of a hierarchical empire controlled by the strongest species, the galaxy would become a community of equals, where survival depended on intelligence and adaptability rather than inherited advantages. Every species would need to prove their worthiness through capability rather than claiming authority through tradition. Admiral Chen studied the proposal with the strategic mind that had helped coordinate humanity's victory over seemingly impossible odds. The new order would prevent any single species from accumulating enough power to threaten others, but it would also require constant vigilance and adaptation from all participants. "Humanity accepts the void swimmer proposal," Admiral Chen announced after consulting with her staff. "We agree to participate in a galactic order based on demonstrated capability rather than inherited privilege, provided that all species commit to the same standards of accountability." The acceptance sent murmurs of approval and concern through the assembly. Humanity was agreeing to limit their own expansion in exchange for guarantees that no other species would be allowed to achieve dominance. It was a remarkable gesture of restraint from the galaxy's newest apex predator. Marcus watched the negotiations conclude with a sense of completion that had been missing throughout the months of conflict. The solitary human who had observed alien predators studying his species had become the catalyst for a transformation that would protect not just humanity, but every species in the galaxy from the kind of systematic oppression that the Council had represented. The final agreements established humanity as the enforcement mechanism for the new galactic order. Human capabilities that had proven so effective against the Council would now serve as a guarantee that no species could accumulate enough power to threaten others. The hunters who had emerged from humanity's struggle for survival would become the guardians of galactic stability. As the assembly prepared to adjourn, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him from a quiet research station to the center of galactic politics. He had started as an observer trying to understand alien cultures, and had become the architect of humanity's transformation into the galaxy's most formidable species. The irony was perfect and profound. The aliens who had dismissed humans as harmless prey had created the very threat they had sought to eliminate. By forcing humanity to adapt or die, they had triggered an evolutionary leap that produced predators more dangerous than any the galaxy had previously known. Dr. Williams, who had survived the destruction of Meridian Station and now served as humanity's chief diplomatic liaison, joined Marcus as the alien delegations filed out of the assembly hall. "Was this what you envisioned when you first suspected their true intentions?" she asked. Marcus considered the question while watching former enemies discuss implementation details with the resignation of species adapting to a new reality they couldn't change. "I envisioned humanity surviving," Marcus replied. "Everything else was adaptation to circumstances they created. They wanted to study us, to learn our weaknesses. Instead, they taught us that we don't have any weaknesses that can't be overcome with sufficient motivation. The galaxy's new order would be tested and refined in the years to come, but its foundation was unshakable. The understanding that any species could become dangerous when their survival was threatened, and that intelligence and adaptability were more valuable than any technological advantage. The solitary human who had been overlooked by predators studying his species had become the hunter who taught them why underestimating humanity was the last mistake any intelligent species would ever make. The stars themselves had learned to fear the persistence and ingenuity of the hairless apes who had climbed down from their trees and decided that the entire galaxy was their hunting ground. In the end, humanity's greatest victory wasn't the defeat of their enemies, but the transformation of a predatory galaxy into a community where survival depended on merit rather than force. The hunters had become guardians, ensuring that no species would ever again face the existential threat that had forged humanity into the most dangerous predators the universe had ever seen. The galaxy would remember this lesson for millennia to come. Never overlook the solitary human, because they might be the one preparing to hunt you.